All right, now can you see Modo?
Yes, hooray.
Yes. Woo, yay. All right, so just to kind of start off, if you've been waiting for 15 minutes, Brad, is it okay if we go till 12:15?
Yeah, no, that's totally fine.
Okay, awesome. I want to try and make sure I at least, show you guys everything there is to show. All right, so in this webinar, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through Modo 10. That is the latest release of Modo from the Foundry, and this is our games release. And more than just that, it's also the release where we've introduced a new development process, where now we are releasing sets of features over the lifespan of a particular release. Like Modo 10 will have 3 releases of features. The first one being games. The second one you can see on our forums. You definitely recommend you check that out. And that is procedural modeling. And this has led to some really great features, much better development practices, and greater stability. So we're very excited to show off this new development strategy. Now, for those of you who are new to Modo, I usually like to start off these demos by just walking you through some of the basics. The interface, the philosophy, where things are, and particularly just a little bit about item mode versus component mode, and how to set pivots. These are the things that drive people nuts when they jump into Modo for the first time, right? All right, so this is Modo, and I'm sorry, it's on a widescreen monitor. This is the future. I love 21:9 cinematic monitors. And if you'll notice, over here on the top, we have the layout switcher toolbar. Now this is something that Modo's had for a very long time. In fact, it's fundamental to the way that you work with Modo. We have different layouts that are organized for the specific task at hand, as you can see as I cycle through here. The first one you'll see when you jump into Modo is the modeling layout. And in the modeling layout, you see we have modeling tools. We could talk about our modeling tools for hours and hours and hours. There's lots and lots of them. And Mesh Fusion, as of 9.01, is included as those modeling tools. Right beneath that, we have our tool properties. Now remember, these are tool properties only for a tool. Along the top, we have quick selection for being able to select vertices, edges, and polygons. So if I want to select some vertices, if I want to select some edges, if I want to select some polygons, I can also cycle through those selections. These are Modo component modes. And you can also go over into item mode, which as you can see, identifies it as an item. When you look at an item in Modo, all right, the best way to think about an item in Modo is it's a transparent and visible box that can grow as big or as small as you want it to be. And you can carry stuff inside of that box. So right now we have essentially an invisible box in the scene, not this cube. And inside that individual box are these components that make up a cube. And this lets me be able to move the whole box with the components inside, or just an individual component that makes up the stuff inside of it. More on that in just a little bit. All right, we also have action centers, symmetry, fall off, snapping, work plane. We'll be talking about a few of those things. These are very, very useful tools in the Modo tool palette. Now over here on the right, we have our item list. These are where our items are, cameras, lights, those are items, and mesh items, which contain mesh components. Shader tree, this is our basic shader tree setup. And if you come down here, these are item properties. Now remember, we have item properties and we have tool properties. It's very important to distinguish between the two of them. So to kind of articulate that a little bit further, let's just talk about really quickly that item mode versus component mode scenario, right? Now if you notice, I press the W key, or you press Y to get the multi-manipulator. Love the multi-manipulator. And say if I want to move this box, which is this whole item, off center, right? Well, I do that. You'll see that tool property, since it's the move tool, it shows up at moving 1.62 meters. And same with the item. Now if I drop the tool, hitting spacebar, and then I hit the W or the Y key again to open up my transform tools, you'll notice that the item properties still are at 1.6. The tool properties are at 0. And that's because the tool properties constantly reset over and over again. So if I move this over, it's going to add in the item properties, or it's just going to go ahead and display how much I moved during that one move here in the tool properties. Now this leads to a little bit of confusion, because right now you can see that my center is right at the center of my object. That has a lot to do with action centers, and I'll talk about a few action centers during this webinar, just a couple that I use all the time. Now what if I came in here and I move components, and I decided, hey, I want to move this whole box. I move the box on over, and I come back into item mode, and I press the W key. Well, its center is still at 0, because we moved some of this stuff the components inside the box off center. And there's a couple ways you can reset a center for, an item right here that contains polygons. We could also, if you wanted to, select our polys, copy, paste them, move them on over. We come into item mode. You see, center, still the same. Doesn't matter what's inside component-wise. Now that we have both these boxes in place, let's reset the center for them, right? Now what I could do is I could come up to, in item mode, edit, center to bounding box, center. You see right there it's centered directly to those. Again, because it's based on a bounding box, I could come on over here and item, edit, center to bounding box, center, and that's persistent. But if you want a custom center, you want to move your pivot. This is something I'm asked about all the time. All I have to do is come into pivots and centers. Pivots are for rotation, centers are just for the item center. When you come into item mode, by the way, you do access this by hitting right click, and then you come down into center. Then you left click on top of that little circle in the center, and that means, hey, I want to move my center. I can move that on out wherever I wanted to, and if I drop it and then come back to item mode, now you can see my center is persistent in that location. Now you can also use this in combination with snapping tools. So let's come on down into center, and let's come on over into snapping. You hold down the Alt key to get into your snapping options right up here. And once I'm in my snapping options, I can come in here and say, hey, you know what, I want to snap to vertices, and you know what, I also want to snap to edges. I'm not sure what I want to snap to right now. And once I turn that on, I can grab the multi-manipulator. I usually have fixed snap, and in this case I don't want 2D snap on. And I'll just drag that on over. You see it snap right to that corner or right along that edge as you see it. And I'll come back into my item mode. There's the center of my item now. And this is very, very useful stuff. It's important when you start to get to know Modo. So sorry for spending too much time on that, but I just think it's extremely important to understand it. Now another thing for those new users coming over from other 3D applications. My background, I started out using Lightwave. That was my first real package. And then moved on to Maya, and then on over to Modo. And I loathed going from Lightwave over to Maya that first move just because I had to get used to a new viewport navigation style. Now it was worth it at the time, but then when I went over to Modo, I got used to Maya style navigation. I'm like, hey, there's this new app out here, right? And I want to give it a try. What made me switch over to it so quickly was mouse input remapping. You can set your mouse input presets to be Maya style, Softimage, Max, Cinema. Makes your life a lot easier being able to switch to a navigation style that you're comfortable with and familiar with. All right, so one of the last things I want to talk about interface-wise is Modo is actually a very easy application to learn, and that's because of this tab layout structure. If you notice, I showed you the modeling tab. That's where you're going to start off. And if we come over to topology, for instance, you'll see that this is a tab engineered specifically for topology. And I've got all my topology tools, but tool menu, tool properties, item list, shader tree, item properties down here. There's a certain level of parity between the layouts. So if you just hop in and get familiar with using the modeling tools and the model layout and start moving through these layouts, it'll actually help guide you through the process of learning the application just by the way the interface is set up. And I think that is extremely cool. It's very central to the way that Modo was architected. All right, so now let's go ahead and open up some more interesting scenes, and let's take a look at some of the some of the new features that we have in Modo 10. And so let me just go ahead and come on over here. First one I'm going to open up is this island scene. And this island scene is a scene that I'm using in connection with Unity and Modo to kind of show off a lot of cool stuff. Now we're in the modeling layout, but one of the new things we added as of Modo 10 is the game tools layout, which is one of the most aptly named layouts we have, I suppose, but also at the same time it's slightly misleading. And the reason why I say that it's slightly misleading is because of the fact that it can be utilized in a lot of different ways. It's not really just game tools. I see it as a very multifunction layout. You have access to all sorts of different components inside the interface, and I think that is absolutely freaking awesome. And right here what I've done is I've actually split the viewport apart myself because one thing I like to do is actually have two viewports so I can actually see my whole scene all at once, and I can see an isolated scene over here in my left-hand view, as you can see. And so if I wanted to, I could pop right on up inside here, and you know what? I want to grab my viewport properties and make inactive invisible, and so this way I can isolate an object that I'm working on over in this viewport while I actually see it as a whole in this viewport, and even have specialized lighting specifically for that. And so, like, for instance, I could just say, you know what, I don't want shadows, not for this one. That's pretty cool. Lets you really hop around through and isolate and isolate and isolate. Very, very functional component. Now, these rocks that you see right here, I'm going to get rid of this viewport. Just get rid of that. These rocks actually came from a pack that I downloaded off the Unity store. And the reason why is they're great rocks. Rocks are very painful to sculpt and model. It takes a lot of time. It's like 20 rocks. But the main thing is when we first started working on this release, we wanted to make sure that you're able to see the same thing in Unity that you see in Modo. And so what we did is we added, if I come on over to our shaders, open up any of my materials down here, we added the Unity material. And we also have an Unreal material, just to note that. And if I select that, you'll notice down here, here's the actual basic material settings. You can, of course, set any of your components inside here to the proper setting. As you can see, there we go. My normal is toggling off and on. And so this is is extremely, extremely close to the Unity shader. And I'll show you the level of parity once we hop over into Unity towards the end. But absolutely wonderful. Now, a couple things about this layout. Like I said, it's a very multi-function layout in that you have access to your modeling tools, and that can be toggled. It basically can be docked and undocked, which is great. Sometimes I just want something that's viewport-centric. Sometimes I want to get rid of items and shading altogether. Maybe you want to throw up the timeline and run an animation. You don't want any of that stuff there. And so it's just functionality. You know, it's the type of things that have a tremendous impact on workflow. I can then hop into my brush tools if I want to. I have access to my brush tools, scene and setup tools, and game tools. And with our game tools, this is really cool. Our game tools have a lot of specific tools for export. We now support FBX 2015, presets for export to Unity and Unreal Engine, and of course you can set up your own preset and save that out. You can establish the output directory. You can triangulate on export now. You can set your FBX export units on export. And so we added a lot of stuff to our FBX implementation. It's had a tremendous impact. And again, this is one of those things that goes well beyond just games. Another thing that we did was export of PBR materials. Now, FBX doesn't support PBR materials, but we actually created a sidecar like XML export that exports an XML file that describes your material along with the FBX file, and we created a plugin for Unity that will automatically import that and populate your materials for you. We're talking about that a little bit later. All right, so let me just go ahead and open up another scene because this is pretty basic and it's not the whole scene. It's just one of a couple scenes. So I want to hop on over into, you know what, I'm going to grab my block scene. There we go, that makes sense. Because I've got all these blocks and bricks on this floating island. This is actually going to end up becoming a VR demo where you like walk around on this floating island. Lots of, you know, forced perspective and stuff like that. And so as you can see here, I have my block scene and I have my island scene. Modo is capable of having multiple scenes open at once. And you can switch back and forth between those, as you can see. So I can just come on back to my blocks if you want. And something that's really cool is if I come back over to the island scene right here, you don't just have to watch one scene at a time or work on one scene at a time. You can actually load another scene to be visible while you work on your master scene. So right now, my master scene is this rock scene, right? And I can go ahead and select an individual rock, pull that on out here, start manipulating it in absolutely terrible ways. But I can manipulate that and work in my scene while another scene is actually open. And you know what, just to kind of really, you know, make sure that we have all the different scenes that are supposed to be in here. Well, I guess not all of them, but one of them that's very important, my tree trunk. I actually have this project set up as 6 separate scenes that you open up simultaneously so that you're always working in context. And what this actually allows for is you can have your high-res assets along with your low-res assets. As you can see, when I turn that on, I've got a tree trunk I'm in the process of sculpting. It's actually a high-resolution sub-D multi-resolution sculptable object. And let's just go ahead and select that really quickly, come over to my brush tools, maybe grab my push brush, because we've got multi-res on down there, and I can go ahead and stroke once to establish the stroke mesh. Probably don't want to have my snapping on. And then I can go ahead and sculpt away on top of this multi-resolution mesh while I actually have all my other low-res meshes there in place. This allows for a really interesting workflow where you start off with, hey, I've got to make some rocks. So you make 15 rocks, bring them into the scene, start laying them out, bake them down to the low poly, then start moving towards adding high poly objects to your scene that are part of separate scenes, just so you're always working in context. Now, a couple other things just about how Modo operates. Right now, I'm in the block scene. You see I switched over. And when you have secondary scenes, they adopt the lighting of the primary scene if the secondary scene is visible. So since I'm in the block scene doesn't have an environment. That means everything is being lit with this basic gradient. Now, check this out, though. If I come into item mode, all these blocks and bricks are separate instances. I can go ahead and grab any one of the bricks that I want to. I can turn on wireframe mode so you can actually see that, and I can go ahead and start manipulating that if I want to. But what's really cool is because these are all separate items, if I go ahead and drill on down, there we go, got that instance right there. I've got a lot of instances in the scene. It's supposed to end up becoming like a, essentially a lighthouse growing out of a tree on a floating island. Yeah, very, very practical, right? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn off the visibility of my selections. I've got all these items selected, 406 individual items. Now I'm going to go ahead and come over and use one of my modeling tools. And as you can see, I can just hop between these things really, really quickly and easily between modeling, sculpting, and setup. So if I go ahead and pull out my soft drag tool, and soft drag, since I'm in item mode, will actually drag the item positions of each individual object. And I've got my fall off. You see the fall offs here. If I click right here, is set to screen, which I want. And I probably want to actually have an action center set to screen as well. And so now when I come over here, one of the things I'm not happy with these blocks, aside from the fact they're not done, just a layout aspect of it for this this lighthouse. I want it to look like it's really starting to crumble. Got all these blocks down here that's fallen into place, and it just doesn't look to me like this thing's been falling for a while. And so now I can go in here and I can just nudge each of these individual blocks into place without deforming their actual geometry, just deforming their location, but with a brush-based methodology. And so there we go. I'm going to just grab that, maybe pull that up a little bit. Maybe we make that into something that completely defies gravity like it isn't already, right? And just refine this, which is awesome, 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 I think. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into another scene again, because we can keep on building out the number of scenes we have, which is kind of crazy. And let's go ahead and turn those off while I load this up. And now I want to just take a look at this notion of being able to add multiple high-res objects to separate scenes as you build things on out. So let me go ahead and grab this gargoyle alone. This is a high-resolution gargoyle that is going in the scene, and it's one of those things where just working on the gargoyle and the gargoyle alone, it really doesn't quite do the job. I want to make sure it's in the context of the scene, but how are you going to do that when you're talking about a 6 million polygon multi-resolution object that hasn't been baked yet, hasn't had any of its texture developed, any of that stuff? Now, this method that Modo allows for is very, very special for that reason. So I've got my low gargoyle right here, right? And if you take a look down in the lower right-hand corner, 5.8 million. I lied, not 6 million, just 5.8 million. And if I go ahead and I turn on, say, for instance, my island scene, go ahead and just take a look at that island scene again really quickly. I can switch back and forth. Definitely have a lot of stuff going on here. Look at this, organized just right. And take a look at my blocks again really quickly to make sure everything is in order. All right, come back over to my gargoyle. And what we're going to do is we're going to start instancing the gargoyle. Now, instancing and replicators in Modo are pretty freaking awesome. Replicators are essentially just particle-based instances and are even lighter weight. In fact, it's how I kind of achieved all the leaves on that tree trunk. Now, if I come over here to my proto gargoyle, this base gargoyle I have right here, I can right-click on him, I can instance him, and remember, this guy is 6 million polys, and I can still move him around very interactively, manipulating his location, and let's go ahead and reorient that a little bit, pull that on back, and he would typically be on top of one of the blocks like over here. So I'll get him placed properly. And then once he's actually placed, if I wanted to, I could actually go ahead and modify that viewport like I showed before. So viewport controls, I am going to hop right on, right here. And I want to duplicate my viewport, make inactive items invisible, and now I can select my gargoyle guy right over here, and everything is so much lighter weight inside this view, even though I have all this stuff. And that has to do with the nature of Modo's new viewport, which is using image-based lighting, as you can see. It's absolutely beautiful. And I probably don't want shadows. And this one, I typically have it off on most of my working scenes just because they're actually a little bit distracting. And now, even with this multi-res object that is in a scene of growing complexity, go ahead and stroke once to establish that stroke mesh, and then sculpt away on top, and probably want to have an offset amount over 30, as you can see. So smoothly, easily, fluidly, and actually see that all update in the viewport, which is extremely, extremely cool. And this is actually something that, interestingly enough, has been in Modo for quite some time. I can't tell you when it first showed up, but as I remember, it was straight from the beginning. But now, because of this new physically based viewport that we have and the fact that secondary scenes adopt the primary scene's lighting, you can leverage this in extremely, extremely interesting ways. All right, so let's go ahead and close down our gargoyle scene here. And let's open up another gargoyle scene because we've got a lot of features that apply to this scene. And so let's go ahead actually and go back to our gargoyle scene. That's right, I've got my low poly gargoyle in here. Another thing that we added in Modo 10 is Vertex Map Painting tools, or expanded Vertex Map Painting tools. And so go ahead and turn that off, turn that on, and zoom in on our guy right here. And I didn't load his normal map. And so there he is in his very basic state. Now if I come on over to my Vertex Map tools, and then I come over to my game tools and Vertex Map, or excuse me, I can go ahead and create my own color map. So if I go over to lists, this is where your vertex maps are located. Modo contains vertex maps in the vertices, and so you don't have to have separate maps for different deformations, things of that sort, but there's lots and lots of different maps you can add. And this map already has a UV constraint map. It's a very cool UV unwrap tool. I'll try and show it to you before we leave. A vertex normal map and an edge pick map. And you know what? We probably, on this one, also want to have, if I come over to vertex map, probably want to have a MIC tangent basis or legacy unity. But we're going to go ahead and create a MIC tangent basis, which you can see right there. It just created a MIC tangent basis map for me. And we also can create a color map. And so once we have that color map in place, we can come up to our Vertex Map Painting tools. I'll grab my Vertex Map Painting tool. And we have some new options in here. We can set the color and have channel masking. And so right now everything's all white because that's all that's in our Vertex Map, presently. And I can go ahead and I can start painting away on top of this, and it does a great job. But let's talk about fall-offs a little bit. Modo has awesome fall-offs, and if I turn on the curvature fall-off, I actually don't want any red there, excuse me, I'll go ahead and turn my curvature fall-off on. And what I want to do is I actually want to paint in a little bit of black. How about that? And I just want to start accenting things. And as you can see, probably want to actually have that inverted, frankly. I can actually just start painting in, based on fall off, a curvature fall off, a vertex map tool. I thought that was pretty neat the first time I played around with that. Now it's kind of chunky, but you of course can grab the smooth brush, start smoothing that away, and so it gives you a lot of control in being able to actually manipulate and control vertex maps. Now of course you could bake an ambient occlusion to this, continue fine-tuning it, and it's very fast. Very, very fast. I absolutely think this is great. Now one of the other things that you can do with this though is if we grab, say for instance, red, and I hop on in here and I paint in red on top of here, I'm painting red. And if I have a color that is a combination of a variety of like say, red and yellow, green, something like that, go right there and I paint, and it's yellow. But now if we turn off the red component of that all, you see now it's green. If we turn off the green component of it all, now it's yellow. And so you can actually channel mask in here based on your masks themselves, which is pretty freaking great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close down the gargoyle that I just painted. And let's take a look at a few other really, really cool things. So I'm going to come back over to my base island scene and come back over to our advanced viewport. Let that load right on up. It definitely has a lot more to do than our old viewport did. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up an animations file. Now, working this way has a lot of advantages to animation as well. And so I'll just open up this Ace Scanium style that I so heavily rely upon. Sorry, I'm going to have to actually find that. For some reason, that just got completely lost. No, I'll just go ahead and ignore that one. And having this multiple scene scenario is really useful for animation, because if I have an animation I want to play back, splitting apart your complicated scene into multiple scenes and previewing it becomes very easy. And so right here I've got my guy, right? I'll turn on our islands, and there's our islands, and you know what? Probably also need to have our blocks on, and for some reason that's just not going to be nice to us right now, so I'll turn it off. But if I want to go ahead and open up our timeline at this point and play this back, let's try out our trunk. Is our trunk able to handle it? Yes, it is. I did something to those blocks, probably a vertex map. Now that we have that in place, I can go ahead and just press play, and you can see that we're actually getting animation playback with these secondary scenes in the background, which is extremely cool. And if I come on down here and type in GL meter, you can see it's running about 19 to 24 frames per second, which is absolutely spectacularly awesome. And so, yeah, if you ever want to check performance, you can type GL meter down there in that window if you didn't know that one already. That's definitely all over our forms. All right, so extremely cool that you're able to play around with animation inside this multiple scene scenario, such as this. All right, so let me just go ahead and close this on down, and let's take a look at a couple other really, really cool things. So if I want to go ahead and open up a pulse rifle, and so, oops, I do not have it in here, do I? And so I'll go ahead and open up my pulse rifle. And this is a really good scene to take a look. Take a look at our new Vertex normal tools. Over the summer, I ended up getting a really interesting message from James O'Hare, otherwise known as Farfair. James is an extremely talented artist and an extremely talented programmer and scripter, and he's written a lot of tools for Modo. And he was saying, hey, yeah, I was thinking about applying for a job at the Foundry, and it was like, please, please, please do that, please. And so we ended up hiring him, I guess, in around August or something like that. And this was right when we were really, ramping up on working with game engines. So what could be more perfect but having an artist who came from a studio like Rockstar to start developing a tool set. And if I come over to the game tools, he also helped work on the Bake Wizard, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. If I come on to my Vertex Map tools, these are my Vertex Map normal tools. And this is something that's a little bit more for UE4 oriented, but it definitely communicates everything very, very well. So if I go ahead and turn everything off, there's what my gun looks like without any normal maps or anything. But if I hop on down here and I bring my smoothing angle all the way up to like 180, nothing's going to happen. Reason being is that we've got this vertex normal map right here. Now if I clear it, or I delete it, actually is probably what I want to do. Now we have this nightmare mesh where we get all this terrible, terrible fastening all over the place. And if you take a look at the wireframe for this gun, it's awful. I mean, it's absolutely freaking terrible. But it's terrible because it's not what I'm used to. I like making very organized meshes. They're just tries all over the place and scattered like crazy. But if I turn off that wireframe, it's actually a very clean mesh, aside from all these normal problems. Now, Vertex Map normal tools are very important because the reason why you're getting these dark areas is stretching over the edge, basically averaging the normal over a bunch of surfaces that really don't sync up well with one another. And what you want to do is be able to actually harden those edges and soften them depending upon what kind of surface you're dealing with here. Now, since I've already done this, you'll notice here in my list view, I have a whole bunch of edge pick maps, and those are automatically created when you use the hard edge smoothing tools. So if I go ahead and I decide, you know what, I want to actually select all the edges that were already hardened, even though they're not there anymore. They're there as edge pick maps, and I can just go ahead and say, hey, grab all my hardened edges, and it did for me. And I can say, you know what, harden those edges, and there we go. We have a beautiful mesh now that almost looks like sub-Ds. Now, I say that because if I hop on in here and I take a look at the gun in render, zoom on into it, it looks quite good. It has very hard edges. This could be a sub-D model that has some very good edge weighting as part of it. Now the handle, not so much. But if I hop on into my material settings, come into properties, I can actually set a rounded edge width. Now this is rounded edge based on shaders. Many people have seen this done by Tor Frick. He's basically the person who started using it in this manner, where you do really tight detail modeling with booleans and really ugly meshes that look gorgeous in the end. But then use the rounded edge shader to actually give it a little bit of a bevel. So we'll go ahead and set that to 1 millimeter. You can see that updating, and now we got this nice soft edge. And so what I did was, if I come over to my Unreal Normal map, you can see right here a little bit of dithering. It actually, I am able to bake that rounded edge shader into my surface. And if I go and turn on the rest of those, make sure they're all actually on. There we go. I need to have my Unity material on, of course. And everything's all back to the way it was before. So the Vertex Normal toolkit is absolutely wonderful. It's great that it is a new addition that hopefully we'll even see more features from. Like now you have a morph push tool because much easier to make cages, especially when you're going to be baking with a cage. Now you can also set them to have your pop out vertex tools, and again, as of 901, you can dock whatever you want, so that way when you move on to another area, it is quickly and easily accessible, which absolutely, absolutely love that. So let me close that scene on down. All right, now let's take a look at baking very quickly. And so I'm going to go ahead and close that scene on down. And you know what, I'm probably just going to restart Modo really quickly because I've had so many scenes open at once. Or I can just go ahead and just close that one on down because I'm not going to take a look at Gangnam Style Ace again. I'm really, not that I'm not sick of that dance. I definitely am sick of that dance, but I'm extra sick of that dance because of that one animation over and over and over again. I'm going to open up my gargoyle again because I want to show off a little bit of baking. And so we're going to bake a normal map from our high poly to our low poly and do that using the bake wizard. And so no, I don't want my normal. I want to create a new one. And so node all. And we'll also get rid of the Vertex normal tools as soon as that opens up. Kind of shocking Modo can have this many things open simultaneously. All right, so we'll go ahead and get rid of that. You can see our objects are sitting right on top of each other. I'll turn off my high res. I'm going to hop in here. You know what? I don't want either of those, so I'm just going to get rid of those because that's what's causing any terrible, awful shading. Because it did at one point have a normal map. So if I go ahead and add an image map, we'll go ahead and new image, and we'll name this norm. And we'll go ahead and let that be 2048. And watch this. This is very important. So once I have that image, I can right-click on top of the effect. An effect is the effect that a material has, or an effect that these are render outputs has. And so if I right-click on that, come back on down to go to custom or Unity materials and go to Unity normal. And look what happens. Warning: normal map is using a color correction. I'm going to set it to none. Recommend selecting yes. Just say yes. This is another thing that will help make sure that your normal maps are in the correct color space. This is a situation that people run into in the past. They're like, why does this normal map look so saturated and why is it looking so bad on my object? Now, we have nothing there just yet, and we want to turn on our secondary object, and right here underneath our baking tools, Modo, just before I explain the Bake Wizard, Modo has always had really awesome baking technology. Our shader tree, massively powerful. Hopefully we'll do a webinar on just the shading features or some shading features in Modo alone. Love using it for layered shading. But very powerful, but the workflow was challenging. It was hard to get reproducible results, and people were like, well, why didn't this bake work? It was very, very obtuse. But now with the Baking Wizard, this has been made a lot easier. Now you can create a new texture bake item that come over to the shader tree. You can see down here we have a texture bake item, and I have target meshes and source meshes, and you can set your texture outputs. Now let's go ahead and create a new one. We can do that just by saying new texture bake item, and it will add one, as you can see right there in our bake items. But let's use the Baking Wizard, and this will help guide you to the process of setting up your everything correctly, right? And so my base file name, I've got normal bake, fine, that's okay. And you know what, I probably want to change that just to be lazy for now, and I'll just drop that right there on my desktop. You know what, change my resolution. And by the way, these are gang edit controls. So whenever you see a group of fields that are connected like this, and they've got this little circle next to it, you can set them to be equal, or you can set them to be relative, you can set them to add. Very useful stuff to actually know. Now I probably want my guard UV. By the way, another way to check your UV maps, just come to list, what are your UV maps, double click on it, there's your UV maps. I've met a lot of people who are not aware of that. And so, good, I've got my correct one. Cage, cool, I've got a cage. I want to actually use that cage. A cage is a morph map. Right underneath here, underneath morph maps, I can actually toggle that off or on. And the cage apparently is not present right now, I guess. Or is that because I have deformers on? Yeah. All right, so you can turn those deformers off. There we go. So it looks like I've got to set my cage back up again. Yes. Anyway, so I'm not going to use a cage. I'm going to set it to none. And target material, you can actually set it to whatever target material you actually want it to be. And the next step, source and target meshes. And so, you know what? I want this to be source, and I want this to be target. Right? And so we're taking a look at this, or excuse me, target, source. Got that backwards. Low poly, target, high poly, source. All right, and next we can select whatever outputs that we want. In this case, I want this normal image. So select that. There we go. And we can actually set render outputs, preset outputs, things of that sort. And so once that's all in place, we can go ahead and just say, you know what, bake only. And it's going to bake to and from, but we didn't set our distance. That's the one mistake I made. So it's going to actually try and do that. But you need to set the distance once that's actually fully established. And so we'll just go ahead and come right on in here and set this up in here, as I kind of messed that up. All right, so let's go ahead and set that over to norm, and I'll set that as two are right on top of each other. I'll set that to be 20 millimeters. And I'm going to go ahead and bake selected. And so it doesn't matter what you have selected inside there, should be able to bake that from and to. And 1 second, shouldn't have been set the cage. And so bake selected. All right, and there we go. And we actually have a normal map, as you can see right there. Nothing too outrageously dramatic, but it's actually calculating that, and it's doing it based on mctangent space or mctangent basis, and also using any vertex normal maps that I've already established on here. And as you can see, it's rather fast. So this is going to be about a minute. I almost feel like it would be wrong to stop it. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and let this run. The thing about webinars like this, I typically like to, show new features like, hey, here's the cool new demo features. But at the same time, I like to give you little tidbits of information that might be useful, especially as you, come along and try the application. I did forget to set one thing before I went ahead and baked here, and that's your bake border distance, and this is very, very important. And so as soon as that's done, I'll show you what the problem is, and I believe it's going to be baked to a 3-pixel bake border distance, which is not enough for a 2048 map, and in fact you should just go ahead and set it to a much higher level so that it just stays persistently that way at all times, because say for instance I had like 70 pixel bleed, between UV islands, and say they crossed each other, they will stop at the midpoint between two islands. And so that's extremely useful to kind of articulate that aspect. All right, and so now that's done, and there we go. It actually did an edge border bleed. But underneath System Preferences and down here underneath Rendering, Final Rendering, you can see down here Bake UV border size. Just throw that up to 64 or 32. It used to take a while in 901 if you had a huge Bake UV border size. That's another one that got improved, thanks to the input from James. Absolutely, absolutely awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and turn off our object, and there we go. We have a beautiful, beautiful normal map, and so absolutely great. Looks wonderful. I want to put him on a building or make a PC case out of him. Yeah, that's kind of my thing these days for some reason. Anyway, all right. So let's go ahead and close this scene on down. And let's talk about export really, really quickly. Let's come on back over to our island scene, right? And so our island scene is already prepared to go over to Unity. But I'm a 3D guy. I've played around a lot with Unity and on Unreal and lots of other game engines in the past, some that I probably just shouldn't because they're too old to begin with, but they're fun. I'm more of just a 3D application guy, and so I like doing as much work as I can in my 3D application in Modo. Got great modeling tools, great alignment tools, great snapping tools, so much more flexible that way. But I want to be able to send a whole bunch of items over to a game engine, especially or particularly when they're instances, and have the game engine load them up. I also want to be able to send over all these materials, right? And so if I turn my wireframe off, come over to my materials, I want to be able to send all these images that are attached to that item, or let's go ahead and just select one like right here, and you can select my material. You see, there's my material. All of these, I want to send everything on over there. And so what you can do, establish a game preset right here at the top, and depending upon what I choose, you see it changes ever so slightly. Now, right now, export file format, it says use latest. I've had this brought up to me a bunch of times. They're saying, why does it say FBX 2015 and I don't see it anywhere else? Well, use latest is FBX 2015. And so just want to make sure you guys absolutely, definitely know that. Export all or export selection, very important. Of course, also I can triangulate geometry on export. I can also export PBR materials, which is right here. And I think everything else is pretty solidly good. Maybe we want to use MIC tangent or legacy. It's going to create them on export. We'll just say MIC, whatever. And output directory. All right, so for my output directory, I actually have a little project that I keep on dumping the scene into over and over again. And I'm going to navigate to Assets, select my folder. Now that's set, right? So now what I can do is just say, you know what? I want to export this. And right now it's exporting my whole scene for me. And I want to pop over into Unity, which now won't fully open up. Excuse me. Oh my God, Steam. And so much stuff. And there we go. Unity wouldn't actually stay open for me there. So just give me 1 second. What I'm going to do is I am going to get rid of this, delete, come over to my materials, and let's just go ahead and get rid of these just to illustrate this a little bit more clearly. And back on over to Assets. All right. And open up Modo again. So now I can just close it and it's right there, right? Because it did not want to expand for me once I did that. So export. Once you have that set up, it's just all a one-click export. Come on over into Unity. As you can see here in Unity, it actually brought in all my objects and populated the materials. Now, the reason for this, I'm also going to come over to materials because the normals aren't working. For some reason, it doesn't work until I actually toggle or touch each of the materials inside here. But you can see that we have that scene, an absolutely beautiful scene, inside of Unity quickly and easily. Now, material export, it's a plugin, right? This editor folder that was added to this project is actually the plugin itself. And if you come over to the asset store, just type in Modo and search, and you're going to see the Modo material importer, which will allow you to, bring in the Modo materials into Unity or We also have them for other game engines, like I said. But the thing that I think is really cool about what we did here with Unity is part of the, or with the, our export to Unity, is with our FBX export, we added support for instances and replicators. Now, on export, if it's a replicator, it converts it to instances on export. But this lets you do is at the moment I add the scene, so let me just go ahead and get that out of there and drag that on up. Nope, thank you. There we go, that's in there. You can see right here my hierarchy. I have my actual object with the items inside of it, which happen to be instances, which you can see I can cycle through here. And also the master objects. And of course, all of these are manipulatable whether or not they're masters or instances. And so you can imagine the things that you're able to do when you're able to actually populate your instances automatically using a replicator system in Modo, export that, have them automatically placed here inside of Unity, and still be able to manipulate those further. I think that's just an absolute workflow win, being able to do those things. It's hugely, tremendously useful, has a massive, massive impact. All right, so let me go ahead and pop on out. And I opened up another instance of Modo when I didn't need to because, well, because Unity is really friendly and does that for you. All right. Okay, so very, very cool. Now let's talk about a few other things inside of version 10 of Modo. Now with PBR materials, let me go ahead and close all my scenes on down. And in fact, let me just shut it down because I want to do a few interesting things. I've definitely been a little bit abusive, and Modo's been good to me. All right, I'm going to pop open another instance here.
Hey, Greg, just want to jump in. There's a handful of questions. I'm not answering them because it's something you'll have to answer. So just anybody that's asked, if I haven't answered it yet, just hang on. I'll get Greg to answer it when he's done.
Okay, how about this? Let me just show one last thing, and then we'll do 10 minutes of questions. Of Q&A?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's on, okay, good, awesome. All right. And I totally lost track of the cool stuff I was going to show you. Let me just go ahead and, here, I'll just show you one more viewport thing here, just with some of the regular stuff inside of Modo. So grab a sphere, right, and creating a plane. By the way, you hold down the Shift key, automatically creates a 1 meter cube. When you click on the cube tool, same thing I just did with the sphere. And let's go ahead and scale that on up. And let's open up our preset browser. Our preset browser is awesome, and there is never enough time to show everything in these demos. And you know what? I want to go down to meshes, and no, I don't want human. I want animals. I want my rhino. It's not my rhino. It's an amazing rhino. I think this has been in Modo since the first or second version. Just think about that being modeled about 11, 12 years ago, maybe, something like that. So I've got a rhino, I've got a sphere. Very basic scene. Now, if I go back to my old default shading, this is what it looked like in the default tab. This was awesome 10 years ago. It was incredibly fast, but these days we needed an update. And the new advanced viewport is actually, just to kind of clarify what it is, it's clear technology. We have technology here at the Foundry called clear technology, and that is what the viewport is. And what it is its own standalone project, first implemented as part of a Mercedes dash project so that they can actually use our engine for their dashes on their cars, for like a 3D engine on their dashes. Amazing. And now we brought that into Modo. And the way that we have been working with this actual render, excuse me, I'm trying to do too many things at once. There we go. There's my golden hour. Is we're treating this viewport more like a renderer and less like a viewport. And what that means is that it's kind of almost following the way that a renderer develops. In the past, the two technologies were so different. They were developed in very different ways. And these days, you know, much like how VFX and games workflows are kind of coming closer together, the technology behind, you know, high-end like visual effects style workflows and technology behind real-time stuff is really kind of merging these days, which is extremely cool. There's also a shadow catcher in here. That's where you get that flickering. So absolutely beautiful. We have image-based lighting right here. We, of course, can modify our directional lighting if we wanted to, or in item mode. And do I not have, oh yeah, you want to make sure your lights are visible in that case. And now I can go ahead and keep on modifying that. So direct and indirect lighting, everything is updating quickly and easily. Select that item. I want to name that metal. And I'm going to come on over into my shader tree. One of the things that we added, which was very necessary in the latest update, is roughness. And so remember how back in the day with the renderers, like, you know, it's like, okay, cool, it's an awesome ray tracer and it can do reflections. And then a new feature was, you know, like, oh, it now supports roughness. That's like a really big deal years ago. And that's how we're treating this render, where we have a base core that is the render. We start adding features, you know, which was, okay, we're supporting geometry, we're supporting lighting, we're supporting, you know, PBR-based materials, and then, of course, image-based lighting and things like individual material components like roughness, and who knows, on into the future. But it's having great results, because if I go ahead and hop into this metal material, let's go ahead and set that down to 10%. I'm going to want to change that a little bit more. I want my roughness on down. Throw my specular. Our physically based material added in 9. When you set there is no specular and reflection, it's just specular at this point. You can see I've got a very nice crisp reflection, and we even have screen space reflections. So if I come into advanced options, I turn that off. There we go, no screen space, screen space. And you can even turn on blurry. Now that is very taxing. I would recommend only using blurry if you were going to try and do a play blast, something of that sort, right? And so we'll turn that off. There we go. And roughness, let's go ahead and throw that up to 40%. It's a little heavy, isn't it? There we go. We can tune that. Once that's in place, now let's go ahead and select our sphere. You can see how nicely it moves around. Most of the time, by the way, I believe it's on by default. Almost lost track at this point. Screen space reflections that are not blurry are usually on, and there we go. You can see our guy right there. It's single pounds essentially. But now that we have that in place, I'll come over to my brush tools, push brush, and we will increase our multi-resolution level. I need to turn on multi-res first. And now we got 286,000 and push brush. And now even on top of that, I can just start sculpting away on top of multi-res polys with a rough surface on it. And you know what? No metal looks like this. It doesn't exist at all. And so let's go over to processing and gradients. And you know what? I want to make some changes to my diffuse amount. And so go ahead and diffuse amount. And you know what? I want to edit that gradient. And so it's a value. And let's go ahead and plop that right on down here. All right, and I can pull that right on down. Now, got that to incidence angle. Actually, probably want color. Go ahead and pull that on down. Why is that not liking me right now? This is one I love. Love to actually show off. For some reason, it doesn't seem to want to work presently. That was set to the right value, which is incidence angle. Few more attempts. Yeah, I might have done something. Probably need a reset, because usually you can throw on a gradient. Of course, that has a very strong effect. And go ahead and turn that to diffuse color. Let's see if that makes a difference. Specular color. There we go. All right. Now it works. For some reason, it just wasn't working with diffuse amounts. Not too sure why. But now I can grab the color slider. You can see I can actually modify the fall off based on gradients. And we're using the renderer. A gradient can also be a mask, all sorts of cool stuff. We need to talk a lot about layered material creation inside of Modo, especially given this beautiful brand new renderer. Now, just to kind of finish this off, just to kind of articulate how cool this is, if I go ahead and I throw this on up, kind of move on over, there's kind of a comparison between render and viewport. And it's shockingly close. Turn on blurry reflections in here, it's even closer. So as you can see, our viewport, especially for as new as it is absolutely gorgeous, and it's something that is going to be under constant development, much in the way that a renderer has been in the past. And just to finish this, because I forgot to show that to you, let's go with custom materials, Unity material, and I want that Unity metal. You see we have on top. Now that's going to go ahead and update, and as you can see, the renderer can actually render the Unity material, and that I think is absolutely frickin' nuts. I'm actually able to use different shading workflows and still use Modo's render. So these new shaders, not only are they great because they offer you parity with these external engines, especially in the real-time viewport, they also make rendering a lot easier for people who are more familiar with, say, a metallic or a spec gloss workflow, things of that sort. All right, so thanks so much, guys. Wish I could show you some more. I think we should do more of these and teach more about it, how to do everything, because there's so much more to do. But do you have any questions you want to throw at me?
Well, there's a list here. I'm just going to start from the top.
Let's do it.
There was one back, I don't remember what you were baking textures or something, but he was asking if you have to use advanced mode to see baked textures.
No. Well, no, you don't. But if you wanted to see a baked, say, for instance, roughness in Viewport, yes. But whatever is supported in the default viewport is fine. Like which the default viewport supports, normal, bump, diffuse. Actually, specular, just probably not really reflection because you're not going to have image-based lighting. So no, you don't have to have the advanced viewport for that.
Okay. And then when using the baking tools in 10, is there a way to get a morph map to control the exploding of a mesh instead of animating the pieces to explode?
A morph map to do it. You could turn it into a morph map possibly, but you're still going to end up doing some kind of item transforms to get the initial explosion. I would almost just rather nodally lay out a way to actually send those items off in different directions. So something can be scripted along those lines. That would probably be worth a forum, a thread discussing how we can pull that off easily.
Okay, and I've had a handful of people asking, what are your machine specs, and then which monitor are you using?
Oh, I'm using the LG 34-inch 21:9. I don't remember the actual model number, but that's the monitor. Absolutely love it. It's, like I said, 34 inches. I went with the one that's 2560 by 1080, or 2560 by 2560 by 1080. Yeah, I think. That's right, because they have a high-res one that's basically 4K, but I would avoid 4K until graphics hardware catches up with that in the next couple of years. My machine is a Core i7 6-core, and I do have a Titan X. The strange thing, though, is I see probably about a 20% difference in performance on mid-level scenes between this and my laptop, which is a Core i7 and a GTX 960M. It's interesting because this renderer is deferred. It does an incredibly good job of scaling even on lower-end hardware. So, yeah.
All right. Is there lightmap baking and export to Unity?
Yes, you could. You could bake light maps. There's not a streamlined export, especially if you're talking about a big whole scene. And the other thing is, I've done this in the past. You get gorgeous light maps baking with Modo, but it's going to be a lot slower than, say, for instance, using a built-in light mapper. Like, for instance, Unreal used to support, external light maps easily, doesn't anymore, and it's just because using a ray tracer for light maps is it's going to take a lot of computers to pump that out really fast.
Yeah, okay. And then is the instancing export the same in Unreal?
Okay, so yes and no. It can do it. You have to do a different import process. We'll talk about that on a later webinar that's going to be basically this webinar with probably a little bit of different content and focusing on Unreal a little bit more. 4.11 allows for it, but the import methods are slightly obtuse, and there is supposedly it's going to be more widely supported in 4.12. And so yes and no.
Okay. Can you target custom Unity shaders on export?
No, not yet. No, that's not possible yet.
All right. Let's see. Can you show how to create curvature maps? It'd be useful for texturing programs like Quixel and Substance.
Yeah, sure. It's pretty easy. So if we go ahead and just create a new scene right there, one way is by using the curvature fall off and painting that in. That's obviously not going to be massively fast, really. Now, if I had, something like this, and you know what, let's go ahead and just select all our edges and edge, bevel. There we go. And so I'll assign a material, hit M to assign. Don't have to because it would just apply to it automatically since it's one object. Now, processing curvature, where is that guy? It's always when I just can't seem to actually find it. It's RT, there we go. Textures, RT curvature. And let's go ahead and go with the gradient color and yank that on down. Now you're not going to see it in Viewport, but you can see right there that is a curvature map. And so as I continue to modify that, or throw something else in there, I can go ahead and pop that right on up. For some reason, yeah, it's not wanting me to select another color for some reason because it doesn't want to actually gradate between them. It only wants to use two colors. But yeah, you certainly can. And it should even work with cavities as well. In fact, that pulse rifle was textured entirely using cavity masks and then texture replicators, which uses particles scattered over a surface to plop down existing images like chipped paint and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. Really want to talk about that a little bit further. So is that helpful, at least understanding how to set up the RT curvature?
I'm guessing. I'll let him respond, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what this means, but does it need to be Unity diffuse?
I'm not entirely certain what that means, but I mean, do you mean Unity albedo? Like,
Well, if you can, Christian asked that. If you can clarify a little bit, we can answer it. How about what is the difference in accuracy between Modo's Unreal Viewport shader versus the Unreal Preview shader in Mari, if you know?
they were done differently. The Viewport shader in Mari is actually the same math. Ours is kind of connected into our renderer, but as far as my own view of it, I find that Modo's looks more accurate, and that has to do with a certain Fresnel effect that is in Mari, and that's something that we actually have been talking about and are addressing.
Ah, okay. Let's see. Is there a Unity Preview shader in Mari besides Unreal?
No, there is not.
Okay. Is it possible to bake the round edges to a normal map and use it for Unreal?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No question about it. The pulse rifle, that is exactly what I did. And I brought it into Unreal, and it looked absolutely gorgeous. In fact, the presentation back in February, we showed it and showed actually the asset in Unreal. And when the presentation was over with, the organizer came on stage and said, hey, wait, you didn't show it in Unreal. And I actually had to ask the audience, I'm like, who saw me open Unreal and display the object in Unreal and navigate around it? And most people raised their hands. But it was close enough that the organizer didn't even notice the difference.
Let's see. Can you enter values instead of percentage for spec value, etc.?
It's just going to be percentage based. That's the way it is right here. That's the way that is currently laid out. It's just percentage or value.
All right. Base albedo color is white or black?
Let's go ahead and 1 second. Let's go with shaders, and let's pop on over into All right, Unity material. So base albedo, just to start off with, is white, but you can establish what that base albedo is yourself. We made sure that channel or that effect was, available and toggleable there.
Okay. The normal use case is that one uses Modo to create single models and export each to the desired game engine. Is it possible to use Modo as Hammer, Radiant-like level editor? For example,
Yeah.
how would you export the floating island scene, every LXO a separate FBX file?
Every LXO, yes, I would just cycle through those and just say export, export, export. And that, of course, can also be batched with command line. But yeah, I hear you, a lot like Radiant. That's a lot of things I wanted to be able to do as well. And that's another thing I forgot to show, by the way, is we do have game style navigation now. And so if I go ahead and just click this toggle right here, you can see that I'm looking up and down, left and right, using my mouse, wow, and WASD style navigation to be able to cycle around that. How's that for some strafing? Oh yeah. So there we go. So pretty freaking cool. And there's a couple options here. If you look at the game navigation section, I can't move my mouse on top of it because it's currently activated. This is something that, much like the render, is going to probably be constantly going through state of update, because you can turn collisions on. It's off by default, but it's really cool, and that you should be able to actually collide. There we go. So it's actually stopping me the moment I get there. Doesn't work in all cases, but it's one of those things like, hey, let's try this on out. And then also I can hold down Shift to actually press forward, and it keeps on running into it. But Shift to run, and Control to crawl to slow things down. And where was that last one that I thought was really, really cool? There's another one that actually kind of grounds you, but I guess that was collision. That basically answer the question?
I think so.
Among others.
How do you avoid the black seams from hard edges?
The black seam from hard edges?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that one is. Christian, if you could, it's a different Christian, but elaborate on that one. Does Modo have a work? Oh, do you know what he's talking about?
Sorta.
Okay.
Maybe. Now, sometimes you get bad normal maps on a mesh. What?
He just said smoothing groups.
Huh? What about smoothing groups? Well, I wouldn't use smoothing groups. I would use
avoiding the black seams.
Yeah, I would not use smoothing groups. I would use Vertex normal tools. Now, part of what you're running into here is probably a bad Vertex normal map. And so if you wanted to actually set up a bad Vertex normal map, you could go ahead and set your Vertex normals here. We could go and throw that all the way on up. I'm probably going to have a hard time actually reproducing this, because it is one of those things that might just happen if you have a bad normal map. Now, we'll just, for the sake of argument, come over here and harden that one edge, or all of them. You need to make sure that if you have a black poly showing up, that means your normal is probably screwed up. You probably need to fix that normal in one way or another, or just go ahead and delete or clear, and that'll return it back to its previous state, whatever that is.
All right. Does Modo have a workflow for combining multiple mesh UV maps into one UV map for Unity memory help?
Well, I mean, you can pack, absolutely. It actually does a very good job of it. So if I were to come on over here to human meshes, I'll just grab something basic there, have that selected. And I want to, or actually I'll show it to you down here. Underneath the list, you can come into statistics, and I've already got a selection set on this, don't I? Is that the right one? It should totally be, oh, that's right. One second. Go ahead and step on back here, and got this pelt scene with a guy that already has his UV seam set up. So by selection set, body unwrap, and want to make sure that's selected. There they all are, and I also will go ahead and just slice these up really quickly for you. and open up my UV tools. And let's go ahead and come over to modeling and UV and just do a quick unwrap, which is up there. All right, so say that those are on separate areas. What you do, like let's pretend this is a separate object. Control X and Control V. So these are two separate items. So if I selected those two items together, what I could actually do is just say they were on separate spaces. I can use the pack tools. I can pack UVs, and it'll just go ahead and pack that into whatever space that you have available there. Now, there's some other options that are worth articulating, especially with UV tiles. This isn't very game specific at all. But what if I wanted to set that across to 3? You can actually pack to separate UV spaces. So there's a lot of ways you can do that. If you select multiple items, they will pack together and respect each other as islands.
All right. Can you talk at all about the new render outputs for VR, like the spherical VR camera?
It's not actually a render output. It's just a camera feature more than anything else. And it's actually one that we've had for quite some time. If I go ahead and throw up the render, as you can see here, cool. But if I go ahead and open up my camera options down below, you can come over into camera effects and you can turn on stereo, and you can actually set a stereo composite. What's very cool about this is, now it actually automatically syncs up with the camera inside of the scene, which is, the thing that was really needed before it didn't. But we've actually supported spherical rendering for quite some time. Just wasn't right for VR. So that's really all that you actually need to do. You're not going to necessarily get the preview that you actually want. Let's also go into, there's a few other settings right here. And for projection type, you want to go to spherical VR instead of spherical map. That's the old one right there. And there you go.
Cool.
Does that pretty much answer it?
I think so. With the UV editor, can you pack into holes when running a pack?
I've had mixed results with that, frankly. It's definitely, one of those feature requests that's kind of high on my list. I've had luck. I haven't had luck. It's something that I need to reproduce, so I don't want to commit to that. But it has worked for me in the past. That might be a good topic for a video.
Okay. How do you bake engine-synced normal maps?
Pretty much the way I showed it. You got to make sure that you set your proper tangent bases. You got to make sure that you establish a vertex normal map on the surface. Especially if there's any custom edited vertex normals. And at that point, you add a normal map to your shader tree, and then you actually would set that normal map to, in many cases, not all, but many cases, invert green, and then bake, and then you should be good to go at that point. Really don't need anything more.
Okay. And Mike, yes, Greg is as handsome as he sounds.
No, I'm definitely not. I look like a homeless man, seriously.
Were there any updates to the rigging tools in Modo 10?
Rigging, no. Animation import as actions is supported now. That's really the only animation one. Look to the future for some animation updates. Like I said, this is a games features release, and we're targeting different features, and animation is on our minds right now, but we are not committing to any features associated with that yet.
Okay. Is there a way to make prefab in Modo and Unity and have Unity recognize it, like all the rocks on the island set as prefabs in Unity?
Not as actual prefabs. It could be scripted, and it might be worth it. One of the things we did with our material importer plugins, we actually put them up on GitHub, and we're going to try and make sure that users have access to that code so that they can continue to be updated as time goes on, things of that sort. Maybe a good idea to look into some other things like that in that respect. There's a lot we could do as far as better like plug-in connection between Modo and some of these external engines.
Okay, last two questions. One, what happened to the weekly webinars you guys were going to do? Two, is there an easier way to use Photoshop colors in Modo? Like, for example, he currently has to use the schematic mode and correct the gamma with a node because Photoshop uses 2.2 and Modo uses 1.
Yeah, I hear you. The color correction has improved. If you notice, like with the normal map import, you also can set your image still. Like if you notice I selected an image right here. Let's see, why is that not showing up with my actual, oh, that's why, because it's an old scene. One second. Let me close this scene on down and let me create a new, or open a new scene. There's image still options that you can set the proper gamma for your image. That'll probably help you out a bit. Now, that's also been another conversation that we have been having. And so let me just go ahead and, yeah, that is good. And add layer, image map, new image. And then you have this image still section right here. You can set your color space, and so I would suggest not changing your gamma. I would suggest setting your color space to linear or sRGB or whatever else applies, and it should show up correctly. But we are talking about getting, making it easier to get identical colors on the color palette from, Photoshop to Modo, stuff like that. That is a conversation that we've been having. The weekly webinars, that is something I would like to continue doing, but 10 was a bit of a rush. I hadn't had a weekend off since the beginning of December of those webinars. We're talking about another series. Hopefully that'll happen soon, and we'll have more people involved so it'll even go more smoothly.
Ryan said real quick, he said he's talking more about hex colors or RGB values, not so much images.
Okay, so you're just not getting the right hex value when it comes on over. Yeah, that's a conversation we're having. We're very aware of it, and that, there are some ways to probably approach it. It's actually surprisingly challenging, but we are aware of it, and we are looking into ways to address that.
Cool. That looks like everything. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
No, thank you guys for bearing with the technical difficulties. That was like, my cat probably thinks I was going to kill him just because I'm like, get out of my way!
Yeah. It wasn't even just you. It was limited to 100 people, and like tons of other people tried to get on. I had to restart the whole thing. It was a nightmare.
Oh, sheesh.
So anyways, everybody that's still on here, you're going to get an email soon. We will post this on YouTube, so I'll put a link in there if you want to watch it again or if you missed some of it. And then also, I'm going to try to come up with something interesting promo-wise for everyone who is on an older version or already on Modo 10. Maybe it's a plugin or something. I don't know. But so keep an eye out for an email from us on that one. Otherwise,
yeah, definitely. If you guys are interested in picking up Modo, please go to these guys. Are absolutely wonderful. And also, if you want to see what's coming in the future before you make that decision, we got some videos up on the public forum that show off the next features. So definitely suggest you check some of those out.
Yep. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks again, Greg.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. Later.
All right. Bye.